Okay, so we are here with members of the Acoustica staff and the Acoustica development team to talk about Mixcraft 9 and go over all the new features that are in the software for everyone in the company and for the beta team, all the beta team members who are going to be testing the software. So let's get right to it. I'm going to share my screen with Mixcraft 9 on it, and we can just start going through the list of changes. So this list is not in any particular order. We're just going to run through lots of things that are new, and if you have any questions, just feel free to interrupt and ask. We don't have to save questions till the end. So right away you can see that there's a lot of visual differences, a lot of art differences. Pretty much all the art in the software has been changed at least a little bit, and some of it's been changed a lot. So to start with, there's a lot of detachable interfaces. So individual tabs can now be grabbed and detached, and they can be placed anywhere on multiple monitors. They can be resized independently, and closing the interfaces will bring them back where they belong. The transport can be detached. It can also be docked up at the top. And as you can see, the information in the transport, that can be centered, or it can be on the left or the right. And we actually really like the way it looks having it over to the left. So I think that's the default now.
It is.
In addition, you can detach tabs, and they have a lock button, so you can lock them, and that, I guess, keeps them from.
You can't.
I don't know, what's the lock button do?
Dock them when they're locked.
Oh, right. It keeps it from being docked when you're moving the window. If that is unlocked, you can redock it by moving the window back to where it began. So you see that yellow outline around the details. That means if I let go, it will redock that particular window unless it's locked. And most of these windows have a lock button. I think they all do, so the transport won't redock if you have it locked. Okay, so that's that. The new project dialog. There's lots of new stuff in the new project dialog. There's the new vocoder tracks, which we'll get to. We added, I think, send tracks and output tracks that weren't there before. So we've just improved this a bit with all the new kinds of tracks. As I said, there's a new look and feel. There's new art everywhere. Tracks have new icons on them. There's a whole new look to the mixer, which we'll talk about in detail. There's a lot of small changes, like a lot of the color has been removed. If you arm a track, you'll see this red outline around it. When you freeze a track, there's a totally different look to muted tracks and frozen tracks. So if we pull in some audio and mute this track, you can see that there's a new sort of mute look to a track. If we freeze the track, a much shorter sound than we had before, and a new. We used to have that sort of ice-looking background. Now we have these blue lines, so it's just to get the different look. Okay, automation. Automation has been changed significantly in some really neat ways, and I think that's worth going over. So all automation now has the ability to be curved. So you can grab these yellow dots and you can move them around to bend every line of automation in some neat ways. This automation works on clips as well as track automation. And it's a really just major significant change to the software, and it lets you create all kinds of neat custom fades.
We can't hear it.
Oh, you can't hear the audio. Oh, I didn't share the audio.
Really good. Oh.
Yeah, I'm going to reshare
It
my
looks like
screen.
it being amazing. Close.
the sound, because you're going to want to hear things.
Okay. Sounds like this. Da-da-da.
All right. So you guys can hear that now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. So, there are a lot of neat things that have been done with automation. So, for one, if you invert automation, it will keep the curves, thanks to Eric. Other things that you can do that are kind of neat, if you split a clip in the middle of a curve, it will maintain the curve properly for both clips, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool.
Things that people might take for granted, but anyways.
You can, if you select multiple points. So first off, between any 2 points is this neat handle, and you can grab the handle and move both of the points up and down. And that, as you can see, maintains the curve as well if you happen to have a curve. In addition, you can select any portion of a clip and then grab the handle. Oh, that's not.
No, you gotta select more than just that one purple.
No, I'm just trying to raise and lower the volume here. And that feature does not seem to be working right now.
Oh, you're trying to do that. Oh, I didn't know what you were
Yeah.
trying to do. Yeah, you can't have another envelope point in your selection to do that.
Right, okay. So if you make a selection between 2 envelope points,
It gives
like
you a
this,
orangish looking control.
That's cool.
you
Yeah.
can raise or lower the volume of a section.
That was my brainstorm.
Oh, that's
Yeah, it's
That's
a
cool.
really nice feature. So if I want this section to just be a little louder, I can just highlight it and then just raise that bar, and it will actually create new envelope points and let me make a section louder. You used to do this by making a selection and then going to envelopes and going to boost and choosing a percentage. But now that process is so much faster because you can just select any section between points.
Yeah,
and
there's
lower the volume.
There's a thing like that in Logic in the buried in the custom hotkeys where you can make nodes like that. It'll do all the nodes automatically, so you can do that kind of thing, but it's buried and I bet nobody knows about it. So this is cooler because it's much more obvious.
Yeah, it is. It's a pretty slick feature, I have to say.
Cool.
We're proud of that one.
Definitely.
Okay, so
And then, of
you
course,
can-
you can select multiple points.
right, if you select multiple points, you can see they turn purple. And then if you grab one of these bars and move them, it will move all the selected points up and down. So that's a great way to say, okay, I want this section, I like the automation, but I just want it to be a little bit louder. And so you can make those kinds of edits. And again, this works in track automation as well as clip automation. So speaking of automation, we now have tempo automation. This is a feature that people have wanted for a long time, and we think it's pretty cool. So if you go to the master track, you can select master tempo, and you can ramp up the tempo now from a slow tempo to a fast tempo. So I'm going to play that back so you can hear that. And so you can create really nice speed ups. That's particularly nice in things like electronic music where you want an entire loop based or MIDI based song to speed up. And it's all very, very smooth. And the master tempo will affect all of the tracks in a project.
And it works with tempo markers.
Right, so there are some kind of
markers.
interesting things. You can still create tempo markers. Like we can change that to 90 beats per minute. And those tempo markers, oh, it didn't create that as a straight line.
Because it was on a curve, I think.
Yeah,
Try it after the 90.
it wasn't on a curve though. That's the thing. It
Oh.
was,
Okay,
so
well,
there
that
might
That could be a bug, guys.
Yeah, as we go into beta testing, of course, there are going to be bugs, and we
Eric,
want everyone,
log that one.
both inside and outside of the company, to report any bugs that they find.
Let's see. Okay, we'll
Yeah,
add another
so-
tempo marker after that. It might be the last tempo marker scenario.
That's quite possible. Yeah,
There it
okay, that
did.
one actually worked.
No, it did
Interesting.
work.
So whenever you create a tempo marker, it creates a point on the tempo envelope, and if you move the tempo marker, it will move. Yeah.
That's
right.
something's
Little glitch.
messed up with that. Just try doing a new project and start fresh. Just
Sure.
okay. So Eric, you see some weak points there in the end,
Yeah.
probably in the end of the project. So, but normally it does this.
So what's nice is when you create a tempo marker like this, it will add a point to the envelope. And if you move that marker, it
Oh.
will move the point, although it's a little buggy right now. We gotta fix that.
Yeah, looks like there's a problem. So, anyways, it is beta. It's supposed to
Yeah.
retain it's supposed to retain 2 points next to the envelope, next to the marker, and
So what that means is that tempo markers are still compatible with this new,
yes.
with this new system of having a tempo envelope. They live side by side pretty nicely. We got to straighten out a couple bugs with this system still, but it's going to make it very, very flexible for people. And tempo automation, it's also worth pointing out that tempo automation can be curved, just like any other automation. So you can have something that ramps up the tempo very slowly and then speeds up really fast at the end. You can create really neat effects that way. And on the subject of really neat effects, in addition to the tempo envelope, there's also a pitch envelope now on every clip. And you can create really
audio
interesting...
clips.
On audio clips, right. So you can create really neat effects with this, where you can have the pitch ramp up and down. And we'll just play that so you can hear what that sounds like. And of course, that automation can be curved. And you can have this pitch automation can be as complex as you want. The envelope goes from 0 semitones up to plus 24 and down to minus 24. So 2 octaves up and down. Although there is apparently a tooltip bug when we're adding a point. You can see the tooltip has vanished. If I click on it again, it comes back.
Eric.
So there are going to be, there are little bugs, of course, which is why we do beta testing and why we test internally. So another thing that's new in Mixcraft 9 is the preview track. In the mixer, you will see a preview track along with the master track. And what happens is anytime you are previewing a sound, for instance, you're in the library and you're listening to a sound, that sound will show up in the preview track.
I muted it.
And you now have control over the volume of anything that's previewed. So what does that mean? That means any sounds in the library that you listen to, that means any sounds in the sound tab that you listen to, they all get run through this preview track. That should also include, I think, audio that's in MIDI editor. Oh no, it's not. That doesn't go through the preview track. Oh no, of course not. That can't go through the preview track. Yeah, so any audio that you're previewing either in the sound tab or in the library has its own control now, its own track. And there's not much you can do with that. Like
Metronome.
you can't EQ it or anything. It's simply meant to be a volume control, so that those sounds, also sounds like freezing a track, I think. Those go through that preview track, so you can bring that volume way down, not have that, not have that be too loud. Okay, let's talk about the vocoder tracks. This is a little complicated. This is one of the biggest new features in Mixcraft 9, are what we call vocoder tracks. And a vocoder is sort of a complicated thing. It essentially allows you to sing like a robot. It's a very, very popular sound in pop music and electronic music, and it tends to be a very complex thing to set up in a DAW. So we've tried to make this as easy as possible by just simply going to add track and inserting a vocoder track. And what that does is it creates a vocoder submix track with both an audio track and an instrument track included in the submix. The audio track is monitored, and we're missing a tooltip for monitoring. We'll have to add that. And the instrument track contains the vocoder effect, which has a little bit of unfinished art at the moment. We're working on that. We'll have that finished shortly. And also loads up with currently the synth strings 1 preset. And that preset can be set in the preferences under the plugins section. You have a default vocoder instrument preset, which for some reason is not currently showing anything, but it's synth strings 1. By default, you can change that to anything that you want. So what happens with a vocoder is when I play keys on my keyboard and then I talk into the microphone, it sounds like a robot, except you can't hear that. I don't know why.
Is it? Look at the musical typing. Okay. Did the plugin get muted?
There you go.
Okay. No.
That just sounds like a robot. So this is going to be a little hard for everyone to hear, so I'm just going to do a little recording. So this is all right. Not a great test, but. So that test didn't work very well, but you can sort of hear the sound that comes out of it. Part of what's new is with an audio track, now with any audio track, you can monitor and tune the track without arming it. In previous versions of Mixcraft, you had to arm an audio track in order to monitor it. You don't have to do that anymore. And what that means is that you can take any audio track, monitor it, and then you can hear the audio and any effects live without having to add a reverb effect. We'll add a nice big cathedral reverb effect. And when I talk, you'll hear that reverb live. So that's really helpful when it comes to vocoder tracks, because generally speaking, you don't want to hear what your speed, although you can if you want by just turning up volume. Instead, what you want is you want the speech to process the sound of the frequency. You can see that the vocoder effect is automatically set up to sidechain against this audio track, dry audio. So again, it's a little complicated, but all you have to do to use this feature is insert a vocoder track, and it should automatically show up and be live. So you can talk into the microphone and push keys on the keyboard, you should get some interesting effects right away. Okay.
Yeah, if you're not going to be talking, you can mute your phone or mute your Skype, whoever's got that going.
If anyone wants to know exactly how a vocoder works, just let me know, and I can talk to you for like about 6 hours about that.
All right, so continuing on. So there's new functionality in the tracks. Like I said, you can monitor and tune any track. You can also hit Control tilde to change the size of the track and have it switch between small, medium, large, and extra large real fast. And you can do that you should be able to do that for multiple tracks by selecting them and changing them all at once. Really fast way to be able to see what you're doing quickly. So that's a really nice feature. All right, micro fades. This is a feature that we've just added. Every sound clip in the audio tab has a quick fade or micro fade in and out button. And what that does, it's not very audible, but it creates a very short 2 millisecond fade in and 2 millisecond fade out. There's also a preference, which is in Project, where you can have these micro fades added automatically to any new clip. So if we grab this bass clip and drag it onto a track, it will automatically have the micro fade in and out turned on. And this is really useful for if you're splitting clips, if you're editing clips, you'll sometimes get transients, you'll get little clicks at the beginning of those clips. Joseph, if we split a clip, we're not seeing those flags turned on, even if the
Eric,
preference
can
is
you
on.
add that? Check copying and splitting.
Okay, hold on a second. You guys are echoing. What am I adding?
So the bug is that if we have a clip and we turn on the micro fades and then we split that clip, the resulting clips don't have the micro fades on.
I wonder if copy is also doing that.
Let's find out. We'll add them and then we'll make a copy. That's working. Oh no. The copy loses its micro fade, so we'll need
I'm not seeing a micro fade here at all. I'm trying it right now, and
you don't have
that's
it.
a brand new feature. It'll be in the next release.
Feature creep.
I was looking for it. Yeah.
Well, no, it says I have the preference. Apply microfade to new audio clips, fade in, fade out.
Oh, you know what, Joseph? I'm running the release build.
Oh.
Is it possible that got fixed between? No, I don't think it has been fixed.
Probably not.
No. So in 421, you should have these buttons. They're in 421.
Hold on.
On the audio tab of the sound tab.
Yeah.
So is this individually? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm hitting those buttons and nothing happens to the clip, and I also enabled it in preferences and dragged in a clip.
You will see, actually, you'll see these little black triangles in the corner, in the upper left and upper right corner of the clip. You'll see that when those buttons are hit. But in the current release that you have, you're not going to hear any difference because that feature didn't get finished.
Anyways,
I see.
How many milliseconds is it?
2 milliseconds.
It's a 2 millisecond fade in, very short fade in. Mitchell, what was your question?
That was my question. You answered it. Go ahead.
What, the length?
Yeah.
No, actually, the indication and the clips themselves, and now I see it.
Okay.
Yeah, I see it too.
It
Yeah,
just
that's
is
extremely
small
useful.
little indications, but now the problem with a microfade, the potential problem is if you have a drum loop where the beat happens right at the start, and you turn that feature on, you can smother that initial attack. So it's not always a good thing. and that's why it's important to be able to turn that on and off.
Mhm.
And that's why we made it a preference as well.
I think it might be built into Logic like forever. I don't know if it's 1 or 2 milliseconds, but I don't think things ever click in it, and I think that's why.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I'm gonna shut down my email here so we don't get those pop-ups. Okay. All right, any other questions before we continue?
Oh, and just to know, you can do that on multiple. If you just like anything in the sound tab, if you select multiple ones, you can adjust them that way as well. So
Yeah, I just tried that and it worked out great. You know, this is a huge help. Most projects that I do, every single audio clip I go through and create a little tiny fade
well, awesome,
manually.
awesome, Eric.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying.
I didn't know. I mean, Greg was saying there's only a couple people that do this religiously, but
It's me.
okay.
Well,
Eric-
I said guitarists will really appreciate this.
Yeah.
When you get the next build, Eric, which we'll actually be making either tonight or tomorrow morning, I'd really like you to test this feature out. I want to know that 2 milliseconds is sufficient. I want to know that it, prevents the clicks without interfering too much with the audio, and we can change that to any length of time. But in my testing, I was very happy with 2 milliseconds. So let me know if you want that tweaked. Okay.
Okay, I'll test that on the weekend.
All right, great.
Cool.
Okay, moving on. There have been changes to the step sequencer for MIDI tracks. We've tried to make it a bit more useful. So, we'll just add an octave of notes. So, one of the big change is it used to be that if you wanted to zoom in or out, it would change the step size. In Mixcraft 8, the size of each of these steps would change. Right now it's set to 16th notes. And we can change that to 32nd notes or 8th notes. But zooming in and out no longer changes that step size. It's completely independent. And it just works a lot better that way. Lots of changes have been made to the piano roll, and I'm going to go over them all pretty quickly. So there is a new paintbrush mode. So we've always had this pencil mode where you can click to add notes, but there's now a paintbrush mode where you can just paint in notes of any length. And the way it works is when you first click, a note you can see sort of gets drawn, sort of a ghost note, and it's showing you the length. So if you just let go of the mouse, it works like the pencil tool. But if you click and then drag, you can paint in any length you want, and then subsequent notes will be that length. So if I just want a 16th or 8th note, I can just draw that in and then start painting a bunch of 8th notes. And then if I just quarter notes, I can do quarter notes. I guess those are 16th notes. There's 8th notes. And I can do any, I can go short notes, go long notes with this paintbrush tool. So that's pretty neat. We have, by popular request, something we've wanted for a long time is this new step recording mode, which I'll show you. So we'll set a note length. We'll set 8th notes. And then we'll hit step record. And when I hit that, you can see the light will flash.
Dan, you have to set the length on the...
You're right. I set the
That's
snap.
the snap.
Sorry, I set the wrong thing. So if I want 8th notes, I can just set the length here on this tool. And then I can turn on step recording. And you'll see it flashing. And then I can just play notes on my keyboard one at a time. You'll see them get added. I can also play chords. And all 3 notes, the chord will get added or at a time. But when I let go of all keys on the keyboard, it will add that note. And so that lets me record parts very quickly. Without having to play it perfectly. And so that can be incredibly useful for doing things like playing bass lines. And then I can create a loop out of that just by setting loop to crop, and then I can loop that bass line. So a really nice way to get notes into Mixcraft 9. Okay, now there's a lot of new stuff here in the controller section, and these are some things we're pretty excited to show everybody. So let's go to something like...
First, it's a nice searchable list of parameters.
Right, so when we look at all the parameters now, we see all available MIDI parameters, which we didn't used to see before. And that list is searchable, so if I'm looking for volume, I can just start typing the word volume, and we can see all of our options right there. Okay, so let's start a new MIDI clip. And we'll switch to volume. We're already there. So we have, just like we had before, we have the sort of, we have a kind of pencil tool. That's what we call freehand now. And we can use it to just draw in volume any way we want to. And that's the same as it's been in previous versions of Mixcraft. But we now have a drop-down where we have a lot of neat options. So one of them is a line. We can start drawing a line, like a fade in or fade out, and when we let go, it will add all the points. And we can change that to a fade out as well. We also now have an eraser tool that you can use to just go in and erase sections. And then we have some kind of interesting things. We have, for example, a slow fade. This will draw a curve, as you can see. So we can fade in slow, or we can fade in fast. And then we have all these low-frequency oscillator shapes, such as the sine wave. So we can create automation in a sine wave that goes up and down, or we can create automation in a square wave. And the automation will snap to whatever our current snap setting is. So if I go to quarter notes, for example, and let's just erase all this, we'll go to quarter notes, and we can draw in a square wave that will snap to quarter notes. Or we can select something like a triangle wave and have that triangle wave snap to quarter notes. So the modulation will be in tempo with the MIDI clip. We can do things like sawtooth waves as well. And the polarity of the waveform depends on where we start drawing it. So if we start in the upper left corner and we draw down, you'll get a ramp wave, a wave that starts at 0 and then ramps upward. If we instead start at the bottom left corner and move upward, we'll get a wave that starts at the top and ramps down. And that's true for all of these waves as well. So if we do a sine wave and we start at the bottom and go up, you'll have a wave that goes loud and then quiet. And if we start at the upper left, you'll have a wave that goes quiet and then loud. So you have a lot of control, and of course the amplitude of that is completely adjustable as well. So it doesn't have to go full loud and full quiet. You can start at any volume and go down to any volume. So you have a lot of neat control. Triangle waves, sawtooth waves, square waves, sine waves, fades, the line tool, and then the normal freehand drawing, all of which will snap to whatever your current snap settings are. So in 16th mode, 16th step mode, they'll snap to every 16th note. And if we do something like the square wave, it will be every 16th note as well.
That's actually 8th notes, but that's okay.
Oh yeah, sorry, 8th notes is what I have selected. Okay, so any questions about the piano roll?
Well, you're not done. You have to show the whole controller manipulation stuff. It's making the selections and raising them up and down. And all that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So, in addition to being able to draw controller data easily, we now have a selection tool. This is new in Mixcraft 9. You can select points, and then just like with envelope points, you can raise them or lower them with this handle tool. You can also grab an individual note or an individual bit of modulation and use that to raise or lower. So you see these yellow dots on top of any selected note. Anytime you hover over one of these bits of controller data, you can grab that yellow dot at the top and you can raise it and lower it. And then if you have a selection of multiple notes, you can raise or lower.
I think you can grab it anywhere, but that just shows you which one it is.
Yeah, you're right.
Because they can look pretty stacked on top of each other. So.
Yeah, the big deal is this handle, which is extremely useful. So, for example, if we have a fade-in, if we have a volume fade-in that goes something like this, and we like it, but we wish that it faded in louder, we can select all of that data and just move it all up like that. Okay, is there anything else in the piano roll? We did so much to it. You can see these new lines, these orange lines that show you where every C is, the octave is. There's just a lot of little visual touches in the piano roll and all throughout the software, actually, that just make it easier to see what's going on.
I have a question about it. Let's say, for example, you're going to draw in a sine wave shape down there in your automation. Go ahead and draw one so everybody can see. Okay, let go. Now, can you adjust that?
Yeah. Make a selection and you can
adjust it by selecting it all and then
that just moves the whole thing up and down.
No, you can do part of it.
I think what he means is, can you make it wider or narrower? And I think the answer is no. You'd have to change the snap setting and redraw it.
Yes.
Right. Yes, exactly. Once the automation data is there, it's there, but you can always just redraw it. And when you redraw, it will overwrite whatever you had before with the new data.
All right.
You can change the tempo of the song.
That too.
Change.
I said you could change the tempo of the song. That slowed down.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so the step editor mode that I showed you, we want to point out that you can use it anywhere. Like you can use it in the score mode. I could just hit notes and they will draw into the score mode. You can use it likewise in the step editor mode. So it's very nice, super easy, very useful way to get data into your project without having to play it perfectly.
And you can move the cursor around and hit delete when you're in that mode too. Don't forget about that.
Yeah, that's a nice thing to show. So let's show that. The step editor mode is definitely one of the coolest features that we've done with MIDI. So if we're step editing and we start entering notes, and then we realize, I hit the wrong note, I can hit the arrow key on my keyboard. See how we're moving that cursor? We can hit the delete key to delete any of the notes and then start playing. In addition, we can use the arrow keys to add a gap. So if I want 3 notes followed by silence, followed by 3 more notes, followed by 2 notes of silence, I can just hit the arrow keys on my keyboard to move around to wherever I want the next note to be, which again makes it very, very fast.
And we have, and I was gonna say we also have short or hotkeys for those note durations now, which can be used to change the note duration without having to use the mouse.
You mean for snap?
No, for MIDI, for the step input mode.
So it's hard to see, but these buttons up here that control the note.
It shows it when you hover.
If I hit Control 1 through Control 8, so I'm holding down my Control key and I hit 1, that's a whole note, 2 is a half note, 3 is a quarter note, and I can do that while I'm step recording. So if I hit Control 3 to get to quarter notes, I can put in some quarter notes and then
8
to insert a half note.
Got it.
Control 4 would be...
I was thinking about MIDI mapping those, Mitchell. I don't know, and Dan. I don't know if the ability to MIDI map those, you know, so you could have it on your keyboard somewhere, might be kind of cool. But no feature creep right now. All right.
Yeah, it might be a little creepy.
Okay, all right. So that's what's new in the MIDI inputs. There's some new things with effects. Actually, there's quite a lot with effects, but we'll talk about that. So there's a new preference, which is on by default because we really like it. And it's called Show Editor Window when adding a new plugin. And what that means is if I go into Effects and I add something like the TB Reverb, that effect will open up automatically as soon as I load it. Any effect will, and that same thing goes for instruments as well. So if I go to Instruments and I load something like the VB3, then its interface will come up. This is the full version of the VB3, the commercial version. But you can see the interface will come up immediately. And you can turn that off if you don't like it, but the truth is it's really nice. We should have had this in there a long time ago. So that is new. In the effects dialog,
the show hide button. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, we've always had, it was called edit before, now it's called show, which makes it a little clearer. And then when the effect is showing, it turns into this bright yellow button, so you know it's open and it's labeled hide now. So show and hide is just a little bit clearer than what we had before.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Now, there's some really big changes in the actual effect dialogues, and we'll talk about them right now. They have to do with MIDI mapping and audio control. Those things for effects used to be in a big separate dialogue, and that's been changed significantly. So I'll show everyone how that works. Whenever you have an effect open,
Audio control. Sorry, go ahead.
You have this MIDI audio control button that you can click on. And that opens up this new space on top of the effect. And it shows you this plus button. Now, a shortcut to that plus button is this plus button right here, which will save you a step. And you can add an audio controller, a MIDI controller, or an LFO. So what does that mean? Well, if we add a MIDI controller, this MIDI control box added to this section, and we can click on Learn, and we can click on a control like this size control, and you can see that nothing happened.
It's probably that preference you have, the learn one. Oh no, it's on. Enable VST controls and Learn.
Yeah, it's just not working.
Try a different effect. That's weird.
Hmm.
Well, like, not a TB one, just in case. Oh,
Well, it should work with any
Well, I know, but I'm wondering if it's some...
Let's try it. Let's just try a different one here. Okay, that one worked.
That's weird.
Yeah, something's going on. All right, let's try that again. Okay, so here's our effect. We have MIDI control open. We can hit learn, and we can move a control, and it will map automatically to that control. So when I move the high pass filter knob here, you can see that it selected HP frequency. When I move low pass frequency, you can see that it changes to that. And then I can move any controller on my MIDI keyboard, and I'm moving the mod wheel, so it selected CC1. And now the MIDI control is mapped to this control in the effect. It's very simple. Now, again, we had that before, but it was in a separate dialogue. We also had audio control. This exists in previous versions of Mixcraft, but again, it was a little complicated to use. So we can select a parameter like saturate, and we can select a track like our drum and hi-hat track, and we can select a type, which will be dry in this case. And when we hit play, you can see that the audio from that drum track is moving that saturate knob. And we can select the min and max for the control to control its range. We can invert those so that the louder the drums get, the lower the saturate knob will become. And we have an attack and release, so we can control how smoothly changes in the audio will affect that knob. And the control can be linear or logarithmic. Again, all these features existed before, but now they will show up as a tab here, and you can hide them and show them very easily. In addition, we have a new LFO. This is really cool. So I can select something like feedback, and I can select a shape, like triangle wave, or sine wave, or sawtooth wave, or even sample and hold random values. And I can select the tempo syncing. So, for example, I can set this to quarter notes, and every quarter note, based on whatever our current tempo is, every quarter note will see a complete waveform. So if I go to sine wave, we'll see this go up and down once per quarter note. And you can, if you listen to the drums, you can see that that value knob is moving in time with the tempo. If we speed up this tempo and make it something like 100 beats per minute, see that that knob moves faster. And if we slow this down to 50 beats per minute, you can see that that knob will move a lot slower, but still always in sync with the tempo. And so needless to say, because you can use these to control effects as well as instrument plugins, you can create really, really cool tempo synced effects. And you can add as many LFOs as you want.
Hey, Dan, if you turn up your delay time, it would probably sound a lot cooler.
Oh, well, I'm not really doing a real world.
I was like, it's happening, and like nothing's happening.
Yeah, actually, this effect we're listening to is on the piano, so you can't even really hear it anyway. But when I hit notes on the piano, you can hear that effect. Almost makes it sound like a...
That sounds really cool.
So needless to say, this becomes extremely powerful and can do a lot of really cool stuff, and then you can hide it to get it out of the way. The LFO stuff is completely new, but even the things that existed before, the MIDI control and the audio control, having them attached to the effect instead of being in a separate dialogue just makes it feel It just makes it make a lot more sense. In addition, I want to point out that we have these sort of power buttons that you can click on to bypass any of these controllers. So at any time we can turn them on and off, all of them, any of them, real quickly, just to be able to bypass them and see if we actually like the effect. And then at any time we can hit this delete button to delete any of them. And of course there's full undo and redo control for all of that as well. So that's a pretty big change and something that we're actually really excited about.
So this gets rid of some of those, like the old audio control window?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yes, the audio control, everything that was in there is still there. It's just, it becomes part of this control instead. And again, we can have as many audio controls as we want. You can just click here to add more at any time.
Okay.
It actually, we think it just feels better having it work this way.
Of course.
It just found a bug.
Yeah, I saw that too. Deleting it's not updating the scroll bar.
Yeah, you can see the scroll bar is not working right. Also, these left and right buttons on the scroll bar, well, actually, they are working correctly. Oh, that's interesting. So hitting these buttons seem to fix whatever issues going on with the scroll bar.
Well, there's another one too. If you go in and delete all your controllers and kind of make a mental note of what order they were in, and then undo all of them, they'll come back in the opposite order.
Well, that one...
Is that right? So if we delete this green one and then undo it, oh yeah, it's getting added to the end of the list instead of whatever location it was in. All right, good bug. Yep, we definitely want to log bugs like that. If you ever encounter any of these things, no matter how trivial it seems, log them so we can fix them.
Yep.
Okay. In previous versions of Mixcraft, we had a publishing feature. That feature has been removed from Mixcraft 9, mostly because it was just too difficult to... websites like Facebook, they kept changing and breaking that feature, and it was just too hard to maintain that. Plus, it wasn't a feature a lot of people were using, so that's been removed. If that bothers you, let us know, but we're pretty happy not having that in there anymore because it was just too error prone.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at the performance panel now and talk a little bit about what's changed. This is going to be a little bit more difficult to demonstrate, but I'm going to show you guys some things in the performance panel.
Well,
So a clip that's in the performance panel, you can now make selections on it, and you can edit things like the automation.
well, you could do automation before, but not make selections on it.
No,
You could do automation before, trust me.
Okay. So in the past, if you tried to make a selection, it would just move the clip or not do anything. So now you can make selections.
It would select the entire cell, or the entire slot.
Yeah. So now you can edit these points easily by drawing selections. You can also... So again, this is a little difficult to describe, but there's some neat things that we've done in the performance panel, which I'm just going to demonstrate by actually making a recording here. So I'll turn down the volume. So as a sound is playing...
Your cue is 4 bars, so there it goes.
Yep. So as a sound is playing, you can now edit the sound, like editing points in the automation while it's playing back. And those edits will occur instantaneously. In the past, you wouldn't hear any of these edits until the clip looped around. And now you'll hear them immediately. So for example, I could have that get really loud, and you'll see that that's peaking and then getting really quiet. So those edits will occur instantaneously, and when you make an edit, while you're recording, you can see that it stops the previous clip and starts a new recording that contains the new edits. So what that means is not only do you hear those edits instantaneously, but they'll also be recorded. The recordings will always be accurate as you make those edits. And that includes some sort of unusual thing, like we can change the length of this clip to make it 2 bars instead of 4. And that change will occur instantaneously. Now it'll loop around just those 2 bars. So if we set this to 1 bar, you'll hear that change happen immediately. So it's kind of a complex thing, but it's really, really nice to be able to hear edits that you make happen immediately. And remember, that's not just things like audio. I mean, you can do things like the pitch envelope. And all that can be done in real time while you're listening to the performance panel.
And I was going to add, the thing that frustrated me with previous versions, when editing MIDI, you'd be in the performance panel, you can be, it's kind of a really nice flow for me for, building out new parts. And now you can hear it in real time without having to wait for it to loop all the way around. So it's much, it's just a better flow for building music. So there's that.
Absolutely. Okay. All right. Now we're going to talk about the mixer, and a lot has been done to the mixer, both visually and functionally. There's a lot of new stuff here in the mixer, and we're going to look at pretty much all of it. So, boy, where to begin? All right, so you'll see some changes. There are some quite a few new panels. Let me get some audio playing back. Let's just get a drum loop going so you can see what happens in the mixer. Okay, and just as a reminder, you can see there's a lot happening in the mixer. All of this can be turned on and off. You can rearrange any panels. You can move them anywhere you want. So you don't have to see all of this, but I'm showing you all of it so we can talk about what's new. So there are some obvious changes. For example, we now have an oscilloscope view. So on every track, you can view just the waveform of the audio. You can see how busy it is. And that's really nice visually if you've got a song going where you've got bass and drums. It makes it exceedingly easy to sort of view the track and actually see what's happening on each track without having to, you can see that this is the pulsing along with the beat. And there's also this panel, which is a frequency graph, a frequency chart. I'm going to be improving this. Now a lot of the values are sort of low, but this is going to get better.
Hey Dan, can you turn your volume all the way down because it can't hear you? The Skype is messing with it.
Okay, is that better?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, so this frequency view is going to get improved, but you can see that because we're listening to bass and drums, there's a lot of low frequency content, not a lot of high frequency content. Okay, so every track now has a compressor that we can turn on. And this is a one knob automatic compressor that can make a very big difference to the audio. You can have a little bit of compression or quite a lot of compression. And if we solo these drums, so without compression, it's a pretty clean drum recording. And then as we turn that up, we can hear it get more and more compressed. Crank it all the way up, get a sort of unrealistically heavily compressed sound. You can see there's now a lot more frequency activity going on. Louder. You can see the wave. All the audio, all of the audio is picked up. We can turn on the preamp and crank that up. Every track has a preamp now. And cranking up the compression and the preamp, especially on something like drums, just gives you a very almost old school vinyl sound. You can make things really dirty. And it can just radically change what's going on with the sound. So what the preamp does, what the drive control does, is it adds essentially distortion or overdrive to any sound. So if we take something like this bass, which is a very clean bass, we add that drive, we get a lot of grit, a lot of dirt going on in that bass. And so sometimes just a touch of that will give a sound a significant edge. As you can see, these panels can be turned on and off. So if we listen to that bass again, we turn on that preamp. Just clicking that power button will bypass the effect, making it really simple to audition whether or not we actually want the effect. Okay, next up is the parametric equalizer. And I'm going to, we're actually looking at a slightly older version of the parametric EQ, so I'm going to take a second to shut this down, and I'm going to load the current version so you can see the very latest code. Any questions while I'm loading the latest code? No? Are you guys there? Can you hear me?
Everybody muted their mics just to make it easier.
All right. Okay. So if we look at the latest version of this, all right. So we can see that there's now a new parametric EQ, and the parametric EQ has its own power button, just like the preamp, and the compressor. Interesting. There's a little bug. If I double-click anywhere in the mixer, Russ, it's full screening the mixer view.
It only needs to be yeah.
That's not right. Yeah, that happens anywhere in the window.
Did you add the?
Should just be on the title bar.
Does the title bar do it now? Because that was
okay.
Okay.
So every track now has a very deep and powerful parametric EQ, and this is a 4-band parametric EQ. The high and low bands can be switched from being a low shelf or a low band and a high shelf band. You can see that the tracks are currently defaulting to be a band, but that's just a little bug that we're going to fix. By the time everyone gets this code in the next build, they'll all default to shelves. So let me try to demonstrate. This is a fairly complex feature, but I'm going to try to just sort of demonstrate what this actually does, how a parametric EQ works. And I'm going to do it by adding some white noise and looking at a parametric equalizer with a spectrum, with our spectrum indicator. Okay, so This is what you're seeing. This chart here is showing you a frequency chart of white noise. And the thing about white noise is that it's pretty evenly distributed between all frequencies. So high frequencies, low frequencies, you can see that this line is pretty flat. And that's what we expect to see when we look at white noise. Now, if we go to our equalizer and we grab a middle band, we can crank that band up, and now you see this peak in the white noise. And we can crank that down, and now you'll see a reduction in the curve of the white noise. So let's take a look at that peak. Now, in these middle bands, you have a frequency control, which we can use to shift that peak up or down. And then we have a bandwidth control, which we can use to make that peak really wide or really narrow. And so if there is a one frequency that is sort of annoying, we can choose a very narrow band, and we can cut that frequency, and then we can sweep it until we find that exact frequency, and that will carve it out of the audio while leaving everything else untouched. And we have two of these middle bands, which, as you can see, we can sweep them independently, and they have independent bandwidth as well. So now we've sort of carved out these two frequencies, and we'll just lower these down so they're more in the center here. Then there's a separate high frequency, which is also sweepable within a range of high frequencies. And this is a shelf mode. Like I say, we're showing the wrong graphic right now, so this is a shelf. And what a shelf does is it boosts everything, all the high frequencies, starting at our chosen frequency and going all the way up. And we can boost them or reduce them. If we switch from shelf mode to what we call a bell curve, if we do that, then this will act just like the middle frequencies, where we'll see a peak. So a shelf is everything, and a peak is just that. It's actually a 1-octave peak. And we have the exact same thing in the low frequencies. We can boost the low frequencies, we can sweep that, and we can change it from a shelf to an individual frequency. So you have a lot of control here, but again, if you don't want to use this, you can simply go in and hide the parametric EQ, and now it doesn't even show up in your mixer. It's not even an issue. So you can choose to view that. For advanced users, this gives you a lot of control. It's way more control than the old 3-band EQ that we had, but we still have that. So for people that like the old 3-band EQ, it's still there. You can turn it on if you want it. We just have a much more powerful EQ available now in the mixer. Okay, a few other things about the mixer. If we link tracks together, if we link selected tracks, you'll now see this link icon, and if we click on it, then it throws in a circuit. So that's exciting.
Edit.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, I mean, the idea is to be able to click on them to unlink a track, and I guess that's working. I'm not sure why we're seeing that assert.
What is the assert?
I don't know. It's not asserting on the actual track. Anyway, these you'll see the color of the link tracks. That's the little color that we show. The exact same buttons show up here on the tracks themselves in addition to the mixer, so it just makes it more visually obvious what's going on. What else? There's been some changes here in this panel. to illustrate that, I'm going to add a few more tracks, including a submix track, and we'll add some tracks inside of that submix. Okay, so here in this show panel, we've made a number of improvements. So we're going to name one of these audio tracks, we'll call it Dan's track, because I'm Dan and that's my track. Okay, so we can click this button to show or hide all the tracks that are in the submix. See, if I collapse that, then we no longer see in the mixer the tracks that are in that submix, but the submix does have this little plus button, and we can click on it to show those tracks. So it's sort of a quick way to show and hide tracks that are in a submix by simply collapsing it. In addition, we've added searching. So if I search for Dan's track, you'll be able to quickly show and hide those tracks. So even if the submix is collapsed and we type in Dan, we'll see this indication that there's one child track in this submix that's matching my search. So I can show it and then click to make that track visible. And there it is. So we have definitely made some improvements. In addition, you can right-click on tracks like the submix track, and you can do things like hide the submix, including all of its children, or we can show the submix, including all of its children. Normally, you could show or hide individual tracks, but there's now a really fast way to just show everything that's inside of a submix. And because you can embed submixes inside of submixes, you can get pretty deep with this. You have the ability to hide everything in a submix or collapse submixes within submixes. All that can be done independently. So you just have a lot of really fast control over what tracks you're viewing. And as projects get more and more complex, it's sort of nice to be able to collapse everything all at once or expand everything all at once. So if all this stuff is hidden and you want to see your entire project, you can right-click and expand all. So yeah, just some nice right-click functions as well that are in there. Any questions about that? About the mixer or these new...
And for those that don't know, you can click and drag on all those, just so you know, and you can hit none and then do a search on something, you know, and then just like Dan's track now, and then
so that's right. So if you have a really big project, there's a lot of stuff and it's overwhelming, you can just hit none and then look for the one track that you're interested in and show it and see only that track, and then you can hit all to view everything again. So yeah, we've tried to make it easy to view just the things that you want to view. As the project gets big, this can get more and more complex in the mixer. Okay, Joseph, new prefs. There's nothing listed under there.
Well, we just have a few new prefs, which you've shown already. If you hit stop, and that was on the project. That was on the well, there's the VST one and the project has that
there's
one.
There's the micro fade in, fade out.
You did.
There's the reset plug. The show editor window, adding new plugins. There's something called enable VST controls in MIDI learn mode. That's something most people are never going to need to touch, but it's there to solve some problems. There's the default vocoder track presets. Okay, so we've added a lot of new Tone Boosters plugins. You can see a few of them up on my screen. The TB Reverb, the TB Multi Effects, which does things like delay, auto filtering, chorusing, phasing. There's quite a lot of stuff inside this one plugin. The TB Equalizer. I want to talk about the TB Equalizer. This was previously a part of Pro Studio. We've moved this into the standard version of Mixcraft. This is just a terrifically powerful plugin. And we have 32 and 64-bit versions of all of these plugins. I've loaded the 32-bit version, but just because on my system, I don't have the 64-bit ones installed at the moment for testing purposes. So the TV equalizer is a newer version. All of our Tone Boosters plugins have been updated to the latest versions. This is an excellent parametric EQ plugin with variable bandwidth and 6 bands, and every band can be a shelf or a bell or a cut. It's a terrific plugin, and this has replaced all of the old EQ plugins in Mixcraft. As I say, we've moved this from the Pro Studio version into the standard version, so everybody can use this now, which is cool. And we've made up for it by adding a new plugin to Pro Studio, which I'll show everybody. There's the TB bus compressor, TB barricade, and TB compressor, which replaces the old compressors and everything else that we had. And we've also added another new plugin, which we didn't have before, to our standard Mixcraft 9 package, which is the TB de-esser. It's a pretty full-featured de-esser plugin, which is just a nice thing to have for removing the sibilance. When you record with certain microphones or certain singers, you get sometimes kind of emphasized S sounds known as sibilance, and a de-esser will help remove those sounds. So that's all part of the standard Mixcraft 9 package. And then in Pro Studio, we have 3 new plugins that are part of Pro Studio. There is the TB Dither plugin. For years, some people have asked for dithering to be a part of Mixcraft. This is an incredibly deep dithering tool. It's just fantastic, and it's so much more powerful than if we had added our own dithering controls. So it combines EQing with noise shaping and dithering and a lot of really nice presets, which is just extraordinarily useful for mastering. So if you've recorded your song in 32-bit or 24-bit, and you want ultimately to create a 16-bit MP3, for example, this bit of dithering will help smooth out the sound when you change your bit rate. Dithering is, people argue about whether or not dithering is useful, but it essentially adds a tiny amount of noise to the audio to make it sound smoother and more natural. So we have dithering now, and then we have something extremely cool, which is now part of Pro Studio, which is this TB Fix plugin. Now remember, I said that we moved the standard equalizer out of Pro Studio and into the standard version of Mixcraft. And what we've done is we've replaced it with this Fix plugin. And what it does is it combines another equalizer, another parametric graphic equalizer, very much like like what we had before. It also has a frequency chart. Actually, let me do this just to show you. Let me get some white noise just to make this a little bit clearer what's happening. So just like I showed you with our own equalizer, you can see white noise is very flat, and I can boost. I gotta loop that noise. I can boost or cut, and when I boost, you can see the signal in the background gets much louder. Oh, what did I do? Oh, I zoomed in somehow. I didn't mean to do that. Let me start over. this thing is so complex once you start to see what it can do. So I can boost the section, and I can adjust the bandwidth. And so that becomes...
How are you adjusting it?
That becomes 1 bit of boosted audio. Now, once I've boosted this audio, I can enable compression on this specific band of audio. And so what this is a combination parametric equalizer and multi-band compressor, where each of these bands can have its own independent compression or expansion. And there are actually quite a few nice, interesting, useful presets that are already made that include compression, compression curves already on each of these bands. So it allows you to do a lot of pretty complex stuff. By compressing the individual bands, you can create pumping bass, or basically any sort of effect that you can do with a complex multi-band compressor. We already have the TB broadcast multi-band compressor. This has been a part of Mixcraft Pro Studio for the last version or two. But TB Fix combines so much in a real visually useful and very powerful way. So this is definitely an advanced plugin that you can get really great results out of. And then finally, we've added our sister company, Cherry Audio. We've added a version of Voltage Modular, of their modular synthesizer has been added to Mixcraft Pro Studio 9. Although we're still working out exactly what modules are going to be a part of the package that's included with Mixcraft 9, but there will be a complete modular synthesizer included with Mixcraft 9, with Mixcraft Pro Studio 9. And this is going to be a super powerful addition to Mixcraft, which you can't hear because I turned the volume down. There we go. And then we are probably removing the old Sidekick multiband compressor from Pro Studio 9, as it's been sort of irrelevant since we added proper side chaining and audio control to the effects, and so that plugin is probably going away from Pro Studio. But there you go. That should pretty much complete the list of features and changes to Mixcraft 9 and Mixcraft Pro Studio 9. I know we raced through some of that, but there are a lot of changes, and we want to make sure that everyone at least got a glimpse of what's going on. Are there any questions? Do any of you have any questions about anything you've seen?
Don't forget to unmute your microphone if you have a question.
No, I'm good. That was a great explanation of everything, and I just wanted to make sure I was touching on everything when I'm doing QA. So
we're going to do
I have a question, Dan, maybe.
Sure.
And it's actually, it hasn't been shown. I could be just human error. Let's say you have a complete project and you've got about 20 markers in your project, and you want to add one measure to your project. So you take the entire project and you move it one measure. Do the markers change with it?
So if you have two markers, like this one's at measure 2 and this one's at measure 4, and you want to add another
No, I just want to move everything.
Like
I think he's manually moving everything.
okay, if you just move a clip, no, it'll never move the markers.
But
if you want to insert time like
Oh,
that will
Thank
make
you.
space and move all the markers. So that's
okay, thank you.
That's always been
and
like that.
automation.
Yeah, and it'll
And you're right, exactly. Yeah, I know. Yes, I know. Yes.
Any other questions? Anything you want to know?
I'm really
You can see
happy with the
it's-
feature set.
There's also there's an oscilloscope on the main output at all times, which is visually sort of eye candy, but it can be very useful to just sort of see what's going on. And so that's always there as well. And then you can see that there have been changes to the time display and the tempo display. The tempo can be quickly changed with these up and down arrows, as can the key, and even the time signature, just with these little arrows for making very fast changes. Joseph, one thing I've wondered about is 4/4 is centered and E flat is centered, but the tempo, that goes right up to the edge, and you can see when those arrows appear, they appear on top of the number.
That's something
It seems like we should add a little more space after that tempo, to the right of the tempo.
that is something I was going to do, and I wanted to ask you guys a question about that. Do you think we should show 97.50 or just 97.5? Because I don't know how many people want to see the tempo at 97.25 or whatever, but yeah, Alan mentioned that the other day, and I did add space on the time, the current time or measure or beat on the left, but I don't. Maybe you didn't get that update. Oh, that's 421. Oh, is that debug or is this?
I think I'm running release right now.
Okay.
I think people would appreciate having the extra character. I mean,
Okay, so I'll just put in.
Hey,
some
Joseph.
Space, yeah.
FYI, again, always take a grain of salt, but Logic shows the tempo 4 decimal places out.
Oh wow. Okay, so showing 2 would not be.
I mean,
at
it's
all.
still there. Like, you can type something crazy in there. It's just
Yeah.
that it's not going to show it. Okay.
It's worth pointing out that with the new tempo envelope as well, when the tempo is changing, you can see it ramping up here at display, and so seeing multiple digits is.
And when it's a different color like that, that means you can't type in a tempo, because we had an issue where, like, okay, well, normally you can type in a tempo and it adjusts the tempo at the current location, but is that what they really want to do at that point? So if you see it and if it's on a ramping line, it's not a straight line, you move the cursor to measure 3, Dan.
Right. Well, so let me explain.
Okay.
So this point right here is 282. And anytime we're to the right of that, we will see a tempo of 282. Now, if we come in here and we change that to 90, it will modify the previous point down to 90. So we can change that point just by typing in what tempo we want it to be. But you can't do that when you're in the middle of a curve, because what would that mean if we changed this 61 to 60? Does that mean the immediate spot where we're at? Because the previous point is 101.
Right. That's right.
So it does gray out a little bit when you're in the middle of a tempo change curve.
And you can't click it right now.
You can't modify it. You can only modify it at the point itself. It's not going to affect most people, but we do want to explain in case anyone asks about that.
Got it.
But yeah, anytime there's a flat, like here, now that it's flat, that these 2 points are completely flat, now you can go in and change that to anything you want. And you'll notice it changed both of those points to the left and to the right of my current location.
Mixcraft.
So to illustrate that, if I change this to 120, it's going to modify both of those points. So that whole flat section will rise. Again, it's kind of complicated, but you can sort of see how powerful that is. Any other questions?
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thanks,
we just
everyone.
really want to make sure everyone kind of saw what's new in this version. As we said, we're expecting to go to public beta in the next 7 to 10 days, ideally. And there's a lot that's new, and hopefully a lot that people will get excited about. Some of these features, like the vocoder and the curved envelopes, are things that are either really neat and innovative or things people have been asking for a long time, and they make the software just really powerful. So we're excited to get this version out there. We think people are going to like it.
Cool.
Oh,
I do too.
yeah. I don't know if it was that big of a thing, but when we did some edits on the crossfade, and then I think you put some buttons down in the sound tab that allowed you to edit like the crossfade because they'll indicate on the tracks which have crossfade edits to it.
No, there's nothing in the audio tab, but you can see there's new art for crossfades. The old sort of lines that we had that were sort of very old Mixcraft art, they've been replaced with this cooler design.
Yeah, looks
So
nice.
you have two clips, and you hover over them. You can see this sort of shadow automation going on. Yeah, that's.
Well, I thought there was some buttons in the sound tab that corresponded to.
There are these new micro fade buttons, but they have nothing to do with crossfade.
Oh, okay. That's yeah.
Yeah, we talked about those earlier. They're independent of crossfades.
Got it.
Okay, well,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, well, look at
Looks
that.
great.
Thanks,
We
Dan.
found some bugs. We had some
Okay.
laughs.
What is
We had a good time.